Five, four, three, two, one. We are back on the Daily Jase COVID Checkup Call-In Show. Welcome back, everyone. What a week it's been. We're in more of this gnarliness, which is COVID-19. The saga continues. The government made their recent announcement yesterday that had big implications for why I'm involved in, but I'll get into that a little later. For those of you that haven't seen one of these shows before, I mainly put up a link and anyone can join into the show to add their 2 cents on any topic that they wish. So I've chucked those comments in now, and if you want to jump in, you just have to hit the link and you'll be into the podcast pronto. So what has been happening in the world? What hasn't been happening in the world is probably more of the question. Lots of craziness going on, and there's a lot of good stuff happening as well. I just feel like sometimes it doesn't get as much coverage as all the gnarly stuff, which is a bit sad because then we don't hear about it and we think the world is being turned upside down on its feet. Some of it is, but there's a lot of good stuff going on as well. So what are we going to chat about today? COVID-19 is a hot topic at the moment. It's on everyone's minds, so we'll address some of that. I've been looking into some statistics online, so I'll jump into that a little later. Global Games had some big news this week, so I'll rewind a bit. So we had the announcement from the government yesterday. What that meant was that New Zealand is extending its current alert levels out for another 10 days, I think the announcement was. And what that eventually meant is that for Global Games, we had to wrap everything up for this year. Essentially, we had to cancel our event. So that's the New Zealand Junior Rugby Festival that was meant to be taking place in Taupo and also Queenstown. So normally they're both events that take place in September. So we have our biggest one in Taupo, and it was going to be on the 17th to the 20th of September. That's been cancelled, and then the weekend after we have our event in Queenstown. So there's a I guess it rolled on to our events. There's been many people, organisations, communities, businesses that had been directly affected by COVID-19 and by the alert levels, but we also have our events, which we tried to push out as long as possible, the cancellation, but we just found out that we couldn't do it any longer. It wasn't feasible. The alert levels were crossed over. Luke, how you doing, mate? Long time no see. Hope you're doing well. Jump in the show if you want. It'd be cool to have a yarn. I've put the link in the comments, so if you're keen, add your 2 cents on any topic you want. So that's Global Games. Unfortunately, we had to wrap up on what we had been planning for 11 months. These events are big. Our biggest event had 15,000 people last year at it, so they're pretty mega. It's awesome. Like, the whole community gets involved. So when we rock up in Taupo, all the teams come from around the country and also from overseas. Last year we had teams visiting from America. We had a French team come over. We had Australians. This year, before the world got turned upside down and everything started crashing, we had teams interested from Ukraine, South Africa, French teams, Australians, Japanese teams. So they were all interested. They were all lined up. I think we had a total of 8 teams coming from further abroad than Australia, and then we had also our Australian base that comes over every year. But unfortunately, a little earlier on, probably 4 months ago, we had to cut everything with international teams that because of the whole COVID situation. We had to tell them, unfortunately, for 2020 we couldn't allow international teams to attend our event. Everyone understood, but it's pretty sad that that had to come into fruition, but we still pushed on. We decided we'll give the New Zealanders, all our domestic teams, an amazing experience, and we pushed out as long as we could. And the teams come from all over, from the South Island to the North Island. We had, I think, before COVID-19 really hit the news, we had 150 teams confirmed to come to one event. So this year was meant to be the biggest ever. Unfortunately, we had to pull the pin. So after the first lockdown, that number dwindled to about 90 teams, which is still a cool event. Don't get me wrong, 90 teams coming from all around the country is pretty mega. It wouldn't have been our biggest yet, because we had, I think, around 115 teams last year, but it meant when we decided after the last lockdown to push out of our event and decide to try and hold on as long as we can, it came with the caveat that if we don't go down the alert levels, if we don't get into level 1 in time, then we would have to cancel. And all the teams were on board with that, all the stakeholders, all the business partners that we have, they all understood. So we pushed out as far as we could, but unfortunately we had to pull the pin on it. It's an interesting feeling when you organize something for 11 months or 10 months, and then because of something that's out of your control, you have to pull the pin at the last minute. You realize how much goes into these things, how many people are involved. A lot of the livelihoods are on the line at the moment. I'll give you an example. So our event brings in thousands and thousands of people into the Taupo local area. So because of that, we have a large economic impact for the region, which is in the millions of dollars. And because we can't run the event now, it means that money isn't actually being brought into the region. So all those hoteliers, all those eateries, all those restaurants, all those people who run small businesses for activities, unfortunately they're not going to be able to get that business for this year. So that's just one event. Taupo is one of the nation's event capitals of New Zealand, so it's pretty major for them that they don't our event gets cancelled, but our event isn't exclusive in terms of our event getting cancelled. There's many events that have had to pull the pin on this, and that has a knock-on effect on the region itself. So we will come back bigger and better and stronger next year and the years after that, but in terms of this year, we just couldn't go through with it, unfortunately. So that's Global Games. A bit of a sad news story on our end, but in saying that, it gives us a bit of time to recollect, think of how we can move forward, strategize a bit, and come back with a much stronger event in future years. So that's Global Games. What has the country been up to? I feel like we've been in COVID long enough now that people are benching not benching the health crisis, but they're realizing how big of an economic crisis is looming, and so they're weighing up everything, and now the claws are starting to come out, especially in politics. You're seeing this. People are starting to point the fingers at the government. You see this from National, from ACT, even Winston Peters got in the mix there. So it's going to be quite this election coming up, it's going to bring up a lot of issues to the forefront, and a lot of those issues will revolve around the response to this health crisis and also the economic crisis. So it's pretty interesting, but I feel like we're just at the start of that. We're going to have an election in mid-October. It was meant to be in September, but because the because the election was pushed out, it essentially gives another month of people pointing the finger of what could have been done better, or what actually needs to happen after the election to recover our economy, and also how we can retain our response moving forward after the election in terms of the health of the nation, and whether we bring in people from overseas or we cut them off completely, whether there's how we do trade within this country, how we go into lockdown, whether it's regionally or nationally. Obviously, the levels at the moment is nationwide. Everywhere is in level 2 at the moment, except for Auckland, which is in level 2.5. A lot of people, especially in the South Island, where there's been no cases, a lot of them are wondering why we can't go down to level 1. Why is Auckland and what everything is going on there, why is that impacting the rest of the country? So I feel for the most part that there's been good answers from the government on that. It's because of large events. If Aucklanders were to travel and go to these large events, that means that that is a melting pot for COVID-19, and the pandemic can rise up again, and we might have another wave. But that doesn't really solve the issue of those businesses that are being hit particularly hard by level 2. So that's your restaurants, that's your clubs. The events industry is on its knees. They're trying to figure out innovative ideas and ways to have their events with only 100 people, or separate those 100 people lots within one event, so that they can be sustainable financially. So it's a complex situation, and there's no playbook. There's nothing to say what we can replicate what solutions have been there in the past, because this is fresh for this year. If you're just jumping into the show now, this is the call-in show. You can jump in. I've put in the comments below the link you'll need, so just hit that link if you're feeling brave. Just hit it and we can have a yarn about anything that's on your mind, COVID, business. Otherwise, how have you got through the lockdown? Different people have different strategies. What your thoughts are for the future, for this year or beyond. There's many questions. What's happening internationally? It's crazy to look overseas and see what carnage is happening. I think even though people are quite sick of what's going on in New Zealand in terms of being locked down, especially in Auckland. They were in level 3 for a few weeks. When I look overseas and see what's happening there, it's pretty. I feel pretty lucky to be in New Zealand right now. It's yes, it's tough. If you don't know where your next check is coming from, a lot of people have lost jobs, and it is a rough patch that everyone is going through, but New Zealand as a country, we're quite cohesive. We understand the strategy that's being presented to us, and even if we don't agree completely with the logic behind the strategy, we still understand that there's a process that we're going through, and that process will hopefully lead to outcomes that we desire, essentially being in level 1. A lot of we were in level 1 for 102 days, and now that we're heading into this period where we're coming off from this recent flux of COVID-19, we might be heading into level 1 soon. So everyone's on edge. Everyone wants to get the job done as soon as possible. Everyone wants to get into level 1 as quickly as possible. But in order to do that, we all have to do our part. So everyone understands that. It's just is this the best strategy to reaching that point? Is being in level 1 sustainable? Can we lock out COVID-19 forever or until there's a vaccine. It's pretty early days to really know if that will actually happen. But everyone seems to be doing their part for the most part. So I want to share something that I stumbled upon this week. I'll pull it up. So it was some stats that I found online. So essentially, it's just the New Zealand COVID cases. So we can see here that we have the daily change, and at the start of when this hit New Zealand, there were a lot of cases, and here's our most recent lockdown here. But if you go more locations and statistics, this is where it gets really interesting. So just let it load. So you can essentially see where New Zealand is compared to the rest of the world. And you can see where the most cases in the last 14 days have been. So India is massive. Their total cases at the moment in the last 14 days was over 1 million people. That's a quarter of New Zealand. And then if you head over to the States, their total cases are around just under 600,000. And then Brazil also has quite a high caseload, which is at about 560,000 people. So yeah, you can also see how many tests were conducted. So you have the cases over time, and you also have tests conducted. So you can see how many cases were in the last lockdown. There were heaps, and definitely more from the this recent lockdown that happened in Auckland. But there were so many more people getting tested, which means that people were actually taking this thing seriously. They were getting out. If they were feeling sick, they followed the health guidelines, and they actually got tested because they want to stamp this out. They want to know whether they're positive or negative for COVID, but they understand that if we tackle this very early, then we can actually return to normality relatively quickly. A few weeks ago, I think the government were thinking that this might be stamped out a little sooner. That's why they did these intermittent announcements for whether we were going to continue the lockdown or whether we're going to push it out. But I think that New Zealand, for the most part, has done pretty well. My feeling is the community is starting to get itchy feet. They do want to return to level 1. Personally, I don't think we're going to go back to the pre-COVID days anytime soon. I think that obviously the government brought in mandatory wearing of masks on public transport. I think that will continue for a little while. I think we'll be in level 2 longer after a flux of COVID-19. The reason being is because our strategy is very different from the rest of the world. Instead of taking the strategy that COVID-19 is in our community and we're going to try and manage it, New Zealand is taking the approach that we're going to absolutely eliminate it. And what that means is that we go straight into it. We make sure that the job is done properly. We have to make sure that it means that we have to be more cautious. So because if there is a community transmission case, then the government needs to smack on the head early so that long term the strategy can work, and also we can get back to our daily lives. Otherwise, if we're going to just live with the virus, then we'd take a more relaxed approach. So it's just how people approach this, how the governments approach this. It's much easier going for elimination on a country like ours, where we're essentially two islands in the middle of nowhere. If we were connected to any other countries, then that job would make it a little more difficult. So yeah, that's the wrap up, I guess. We're going to see a lot more, or this is my personal view. I don't know if it will happen. I don't have a crystal ball, but we're going to see a lot more people who are struggling financially in the next couple of months. The reasons being is that the wage subsidy is going to run out, and a lot of employees have been relying on that to get by. A lot of business owners haven't had the income that they need to sustain their businesses, so they might make a lot of employees redundant in the next few months. We will be seeing a few more people, I think, becoming a little bit more entrepreneurial, which is always a good thing. They'll lose those people who will lose their jobs. They'll have to earn money somehow to get by, and so they'll jump online. They might take a few courses, and they might start selling things, or finding a product or service that they can manageably do, and just start selling their services. So they might start building a deck for their mate, or they might start selling some shoes that are imported. So they can do anything, but that I think we're going to see a lot more of that happening, rather than going out to find jobs for businesses. I think that people will have to start thinking, how can I actually make my own success here? Because the job market is going to be absolutely flooded. There's going to be a lot of people looking for work, and also people can't be choosy during these times. They can't. They might have this ideal dream job, but for the next couple of years, they may not be able to find it, which is the reality. So they will need to start thinking, how can I actually move forward? How can I strategically think? I've got these resources here, I've got these contacts here. How can I join them together? How can I add value to them? It's going to be interesting what people actually do to get themselves off the ground, because it will be tough. I posted an article a little earlier in the week about mental health. This is something that's quite dear to my heart. I've been very lucky with my mental health, because I'm naturally a very optimistic guy. I can normally problem solve, and I can figure out what my next move is. And if I am going through a bit of a tough period, I manage to work myself out of it pretty quickly. So I've been very lucky in that regard, but I know that mental health is a huge issue for this country. We have one of the highest youth suicide rates in the world. It's not worth hiding that stat. We've got to face out front and figure out how do we bring that down. And unfortunately, with this these economic challenges that are coming up, I think off the back of that will mean that we have a lot more uncertainty, and that will play out into people's lives, and a decrease in mental health levels, which is terrible. We need to figure out how we get people out of those stages, because a lot of people think that once you reach success, happiness comes. But we actually need to flip that model. We need to make sure people are happier, because then they're more productive, and they know where they're going, and then they can actually reach that success in the first place. So mental health it's a big topic. The government in their last budget before all this went down, they put, I think, $1.9 billion into mental health resourcing. I could be wrong with that number, but it was a big sum. Essentially, they're prioritizing it by resourcing it. But from what I've been gathering online, just from what I've read, the resourcing isn't actually the issue. The issue is that it's a systemic issue. There needs to be more people, or there needs to be a deeper understanding of how we fix these issues. So you can throw all the money in the world, or I'll give you an example. So if you have a plane, right, and you pack it full of fuel, you give it fuel, if it's got the wrong pilot and it goes to the wrong destination, then it's not very useful, right? So that's essentially what money's doing to the mental health system. If you throw money at it, but it doesn't have the correct direction or the correct goal or the correct strategy, then the outcomes won't actually be the outcomes that you desire, and it's sort of a waste of money, or it's a waste of fuel. So we need the right strategy in place. This isn't an area of expertise of mine. I've just seen people and mates go through their own mental health challenges, and I know it's real, and I know it needs to be fixed pretty quickly, because if it doesn't, then the rest of us suffer, because essentially we need people who if they're happier, they're more productive, they can do things for other people. Once like if you imagine yourself and you think that your needs aren't being met, whether that's financially, whether that's mentally, physically, then any of these real big pillars in your life, if they start to crumble, then it affects other things in your life. And if you can't take care of yourself, you can't take care of your friends, you can't take care of your family, and you can't take care of your colleagues. It sort of has this knock-on effect. So mental health is really it's a really important issue. It's a big topic. People need to understand that it's not going to be a quick fix, but we need to realize that it's an issue that's here, and we need to actually start prioritizing it. Because if we don't, then it'll start to bite us, right? It'll come to bite us, and we'll have to actually pay for it in other ways. Maybe that's through resourcing our health departments, and that means less money going into education or security or whatever it is. It's not an easy fix, but one that I'm quite passionate about. So yeah, that's my 2 cents on what's happening at the moment. The elections, they're coming up. It's a gnarly time. For those of you that think that politics isn't for you, or that politics is boring, it affects all of us, you know. So I encourage everyone to get out there, to actually think, what is the world that I want to live in? One, and then two, if I were in government, what would I do to reach that? And so you'll find that there'll be certain parties or certain politicians that align with those values or align with those strategies, and it's likely that there will be some parties that align in your thinking in one way, and maybe doesn't align in your thinking in another way. So you need to sort of do a little bit of research. It's pretty easy these days. You just jump online and see what the parties are talking about. Personally, I just like their pages on Facebook, and then I get marketed to from all angles, not just the ones I like, and then that gives me a bit of a starting point for a picture, and then if I want to do more reading, then I just jump onto their pages. So it's not hard to actually find out more about these issues. You just need to take the first steps. And if you're thinking about voting or not voting, if you don't vote, then you've got no right to complain after the fact when your people or your party don't get into government and don't make the right decisions. If you do vote, then your vote is counted, and hopefully there are other people that are thinking the same way as you, and you get your party in on the mix, and they can make the moves that you want to make. Politics is a complex thing, but you can simplify it down. It just comes down to values, and then when the values are there, then the strategy follows, and hopefully we reach those goals that we want to reach. So people make it more complicated than it needs to be. It's not too bad, but this year more than ever has shown that what an impact politics can actually have. There's more happening in the background than I've ever seen. Maybe I'm just taking more notice these days, but politics does play a huge role in our lives, and if you don't see it or don't realize it, then that's okay, but you've got to know that it's happening all around us. It affects our businesses, it affects how we get taxed, it affects where the resourcing is going to, whether it's mental health, to schooling, whether to our police. So you can see in the society around us and how that shapes the future. So big ideas, important stuff. Yeah, that's pretty much it from me. If anyone wants to jump on, now's your chance. I've been on for half an hour, just having a yarn. Be brave if you're out there and want to have a chat. Otherwise, I'll call the show and I'll jump on the live next time and catch you then. But I'll give you a couple more minutes. These last 24 hours, it's been a bit of a roller coaster for me. I had so I watched the recent announcement from the government, which essentially meant that we had to cancel our global games events, and yeah, that affects a lot of people. We have thousands of people attending these events. There's a lot of businesses in those regions that rely on our events to come to their area and provide a bit of economic impact. We had about 80 crew coming along this time. We had probably, it would have been about 10,000 people that would have been at our biggest event in Taupo. So that's a bit of a shame, but that's okay. We push on, and yeah, this year was just out of our hands. We're going into our election next month, which is big. So the last 24 hours, cancelled global games. I also had a test this morning because I'm also at uni, so that was on biochemistry. So I studied till the early hours of the morning, went to my test, did that. I think it went well. Hopefully it went well. I'll know when the results come out. But yeah, the lecturers could have been a little more nasty to us in terms of the questions. So thank you, lecturers there. And then what else? After that, went to a gym. I normally go to the gym after a test because it just gets my mind refreshed and allows me to have a fresh start. And then here we are, jumped on a podcast. So not too bad. Fun day out. Good 24 hours. But yeah, that's the update. 32 minutes later. If anyone's out there, last chance. Otherwise, I'll sign out. That's all from me. Okay. I'll catch you on the flip side. Hope everyone's doing well. Have a great weekend. We'll see you next time. Peace.